Hey you guys, this is Dawn. Welcome back to Gulf Coast October. In this series, I'm reading my book, Enchanted in Bay St. YaYa. I do my little thumbnail. Nope. Today we're reading Chapter 9, September in the South. So I'd love it if you hang out. And let's pray my hair doesn't catch on fire today. Boom, 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 boom. Welcome back. Today we are reading Chapter 9, September in the South. To backtrack a little bit where we left off, Deary has a broken arm. They had went out to Nan's, got patched up. Claire took her out there. Her and Claire made up. And when she got back into Bay St. YaYa, they found out that Bird has passed away. My dear friend Bernard Bird Broussard Weather passed away peacefully of a stroke while sitting on his front porch rocking chair on September the 1st, 1998. Bird's funeral was simple enough, but we did indeed have a large turnout at the Hole afterward. The days were just as hot as they had been in the middle of July, and we all needed a break. Between the heat and the constant buzzing of overworked fans and cooling units, my mind was in a constant state of static. I wasn't alone. People were getting edgy. June had made a big deal about not having the resources or the energy to throw a reception after the funeral, but also projected onto everyone that she felt pressured to do so. To take care of our friend, everyone pitched in, and Mary hired a catering company out of Slidell. Even still, June just couldn't stay out of the kitchen that day. Mary got on to her throughout the entire afternoon. "June, put that damn Morse cloth away and come sit down right this minute. We didn't pay all this money to watch you work. Sit down." But June could only sit for a moment at a time without feeling like she should be doing something. She pestered the workers on how to arrange the platters and belittled them on how to clean up properly between preps. We could all hear her from the diner, especially when her voice would crack. No amount of dancing shadows when the fan meets the sunlight could distract from it. It worked all of our nerves, but none more than Joe Al's. He seemed to be at his wit's end with his own grief, and watching June's energy border insanity was too much for him. He tried to confront her on it later that evening, which turned into a full-scale screaming fight. They were the last two at the diner, and it seemed that June was scrubbing and disinfecting away all the energy of all the caterers until she left literal scratch marks on the surfaces of the counters and the appliance handles. "June, babe, you're going to hurt yourself. What can I do?" "You can quit talking so damn much. Get that cigarette out of here. I want it done right. Do you know what that means?" She got to her knees and wiped imagined ashes off of the floor, then blamed him for wasting a perfectly clean wash rag. He granted her wishes to get out of her way so she could clean up on her own, but he told her it was over. He disappeared for 2 whole weeks. A patron saw him leave the liquor store less than an hour after the fight, and he had a large brown bag. The police didn't seem too concerned, and they were right. He showed up at Mass one day, sober, clean, and had moved on from the whole thing altogether. Though he didn't finally make peace with June for a few weeks still after that, their romantic relationship was over. We all mourned Bird differently. Mary survived her grief by listening quietly to anyone who needed a shoulder. Father Fourleaf mentioned Bird at every service during the Prayer of the Faithful. He also did his best to reach out to any family of Bird's, but no one had replied, not even his baby sister. June was quiet for a long time after the breakup, and we were all grateful for that. Needless to say, everyone had been worried about me. But Claire was the best companion a girl could have in a time like that. After the funeral, I stayed at Bird's exclusively. My excuse was that I needed to take care of Okey Doke and Rudy, the parrot, but truth be told, I couldn't bear to be anywhere else. I needed to grieve amongst his energy, his things, and his smell. This also gave my brother and I the much-needed break we've been desperate for, and he could have parties again without freaking me out. I could come and go as I pleased at Bird's, and I had full responsibility of managing my living expenses. Other than a small basket of papers, pictures, glue, and lace for a scrapbook I was working on in memory of my friend, I didn't want to litter his house with my crafting escapades. I visited Claire's often to work on my wares. Desperate times called for desperate measures, but now I wasn't feeling so desperate. I also wasn't feeling so childlike. Okey Doke had never been walked much, but we started taking walks in the evening. She loved the beach and looked forward to galloping down the piers at the harbor. Only one was off limits due to a territorial sailorman who lived on his boat, but no one else was ever around at night to care. The dog was partial to a particular pier that she loved to jump off of. She'd swim back to the shore, run back around, gallop up the dock, and do it again. One night, just as she made her way for her first jump, she stopped short, yelped, and ran back to me trembling. What in the world? I asked her. I adjusted my eyes to see a small black misty figure at the end of the pier, stretching his shape tall and short again. When tall, his face looked terrifying with an open mouth, sharp teeth, and deep, empty eye sockets. When the figure was short, there wasn't much of one to make out. I became petrified, but only for a moment before I heard a strange, subtle splashing below us. I peeked over the edge and I saw something I'd never seen before. A small group of bull sharks were making a bit of a ruckus. The water looked as if it was bubbling, and my heart skipped a beat. They were hunting in a group and had found their way into the harbor. If Okey-doke had made the jump, she would have swum right into their trap and would be gone. As freaked out as I was, I knew that we encountered the guide that Mary had told me about the day outside of the diner, when she had seen the ghost of Joe Aloysius's brother, Anthony Francis. Some experiences with the paranormal are simply spirits who are passing through. They show up to give us strength when times are tough, or, in Joe Al's case that day, to give a good brotherly poke at his recent experience of getting lucky. Other times the unseen are entities that reside in the realm of good versus evil. Claire had to school me on this when my experiences became more vivid. There are many types of guides. Some are assigned to us specifically to protect us from dark energies who have claimed individuals as their own. Dark spirits have different reasons for this. I experienced this for many years before I started to wake up. In my case, dark entities found me to feed off my energy so they could derange it into something to fuel their own misery with. When evil forces of the other realms do this, their etheric cord is still there. The energy is still connected to the host, and it presents as madness. The mind becomes so tortured that a person cannot even sleep through the night without whispering, "No," and "Stop." Finally, it would stop for a while, just to pick back up again when the dust had finally settled. For me, when things were good, they were really good. When things were bad, they were downright stagnant. I had always been aware of this, but I never knew why. These guides that protect us from evil forces often take a form of darkness themselves. This is how they are able to relate, like an undercover cop. By looks alone, the average mind would not differentiate the difference. So much of humanity has been duped into thinking that we all know what is good and what is bad. It doesn't have to be complicated, but we have made it that way, haven't we? I didn't want it to be complicated. I wanted an open dialogue. I'm so glad I was blessed with an open mind for this, because as usual, this led to something precious and personal. Some may say that absence makes the heart grow fonder. For me, this isn't always true. My bones get stronger with exposure. I got into the habit of filling Claire in on experiences as I was having them, the moment I would have them. But Joe Al became a confidant as well. His energy is different, and even though he was old-fashioned and worldly, I respected his honest take on things. I also respected his sense of camaraderie. This man was a stand-up guy when he needed to be. He could be doofy and aloof, but when danger calls, you can count on Joe Al. One night I kept hearing the wind chime over Bird's kitchen sink, like the door was open, but it wasn't. I could clearly see that from where I was sitting. The chime got louder and louder. I eventually got up and walked into the kitchen. As I did, I saw a dark mist move from the wind chimes to the stove. Upon closer inspection, I could hear a faint hissing sound. Oh no. I opened the oven door, and although faint, I could smell something like metal and eggs. Joe Al came as fast as he could, and he encouraged me to call Claire in the meantime. "Yeah," I said to Claire when describing the wind chime. "It was just clanging around, but no doors were open or windows or anything. The vent doesn't blow that hard. And I saw that mist again. Yes, I know, it's the same one." All the while, Claire seemed fascinated, but not shocked. She loved listening and always knew how to calm my nerves. "You're special indeed to have such a relationship with your guide. Have you asked him his name yet?" "What? He has a name?" "Of course he does." "How do I do that?" "Just ask him," she replied. But after thinking a moment and knowing me how she knows me, she decided she should come over. I was still sitting on the porch waiting for Joe Al when she arrived. Joe Al pulled up right behind her. They made kind yet subtle faces at each other as they walked up to the porch. I saw Claire wink and pat a huge canvas bag that hung from her bony shoulder. He gave her a gentle nod back. They'd obviously had some unspoken conversation on how to keep me busy while Joe Al fixed the gas leak. "Oh, thank you," I said to him as he approached. He gave me a gentle sideways hug, and Claire told him that we'd leave him to it. "All right, young lady, let's have a sit. Come on, right here on the patio." Claire carefully sat down, crossed her legs, and began to rummage around in her bag. I sat down facing her. She pulled some magical things from her satchel, and I could feel my shoulders relax. She used a piece of chalk to draw a circle around us. I imagined an old preacher of mine pointing at us and yelling about hellfire and damnation. She handed me a toothpick and a large white candle. "What do I write?" Claire laughed. Ask what his name is. Oh, duh. I used the toothpick to scratch into the candle. What is your name, love, dearie, and Claire? With my fingernail, I intuitively scratched some fungus and dirt off of the patio board beneath me, and I smeared it into the lettering of the candle. Then I wiped away the excess. Meanwhile, Claire made a small pile of herbs. She was totally speaking my language while being blunt and to the point. Rosemary for protection, rue as an offering, rose petals for personal communication, bay leaves to bring our request to fruition. Now, light your message, dear. I lit the candle with a strike anywhere match, set it among the herbs, and we both put our hands on it together. I was looking around for a flashing sign with a name on it, or maybe a preacher with a pitchfork. Close your eyes, she said. We both sat, eyes closed, with our hands on the candle when the wind started to pick up. It was gentle, but it was there. I could hear Rudy upstairs talking, and I panicked. This distracted me. I felt so stupid for leaving a little parrot trapped in a cage while the stove was leaking gas. I looked around for Okie Doke. She was safe under the grandmother tree. I broke from our circle, and I ran up the stairs. He was fine when I arrived, but he was quite chatty. I assumed he was agitated, so I brought him outside to set his cage on the patio next to Claire. He kept talking. Did I ruin it? I asked as I plopped back down. The wind became a little stronger. Some oak leaves escaped their branches and fluttered into our circle. One skimmed the candle and dissipated in a poof of flame and smoke. All of the chimes and swing sets within the yards around us started to make noises. The bird got louder, and we realized he was trying to give us a message. La Corteza, the bird yelped. La Corteza? Claire asked. Then all became quiet. Maybe that's his name. Maybe my guide's name is La Corteza, I replied, excited, but Claire shook her head no, and Rudy wasn't done. Del Roble. What? We both demanded. Just then the screen door slammed shut, and Joe Owl said, Del Roble, La Corteza del Roble. Means tree bark. Claire and I stared at each other. His name is Tree Bark? I asked. What? Joe Owl replied. No. Her name. Her name, Claire answered. My guide is a girl, and her name is Tree Bark. I asked, confused. Joe Owl waited patiently with his head cocked to the side as if wondering what us crazy southern women were up to now. Her name is La Corteza del Roble. She is named from the bark of a tree, Claire confidently suggested. I leaned to the side to look behind Claire at the huge tree where Okie Doke was curled up and snoozing at her base. As if reading my mind, Joe Owl corrected her. Oak tree, he said. Oven's fixed. As he said this, the only thing I could hear was the chime in the kitchen again. I picked up one of the live oak leaves that entered our ritual, and I said thank you. Claire also said thank you, but she spoke to the elements that provided us in our circle. Joe Owl didn't really get it, so he said, You're welcome. I laughed, I got up, and gave him a huge hug. Thank you too, Joe Aloysius. You are my hero. Claire motioned for us to scoop up some of the herbs, and so we did. At the edge of the patio, we all three stood and held our hands out in front of our faces. Claire started, and we followed. Thank you, she said. Thank you, Joe Owl, I repeated. The wind came back for a momentary wink, and we all blew the herbs into the air. The mixture reclaimed itself into a mass, then danced and swirled toward the street and made its way to the beach. The wind also took with it any lingering gas in the air, and all was well. After that, I made root beer floats, and we spent the evening on the patio talking about the experiences I'd been having. Claire shared some of her stories as well, but also so did Joe Owl. My brother was my everything. Really, he was. Anthony Francis was the brave one. I was always too chicken shit to have any fun. He came up with all the plans. We got into a lot of trouble, but it was fun. I could feel him, after he died, still trying to get us into trouble. He chuckled and looked at me. His eyes made full contact with mine. It almost pierced my soul. That was the first time I had ever heard him say a word about his brother, and it was also the moment I saw him let his guard down with us. From then on, he was comfortable with me, Claire, obviously Mary and June, but would revert to skittish and simple when others were around. That was the night we became actual friends. I missed Bird so much, but it felt like he was there too. I didn't feel alone, and for the first time in my life, I felt as if I needed nothing. Okay, so thanks for hanging out for that chapter, and if you did, that's cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hope I see you in the next chapter next time. which would be chapter 10, and it's called The Memory Book. Bye. I didn't want to be complicated. In my case, Okie Doke had never been to give a good old brotherly poke at his recent Other times, the unseen are when she had seen the ghost of Joel, which is his twin brother. Remember Anthony Francis? When his... Oh, okay, this hair is out of here. Like, why? Where did it go? Is it attached? When the figure was short, there wasn't much. They also give my brother... It's hiding now. It's... Oh, what? But now I was feeling... Come on now. I'm actually having a pretty hair day, but there's this one rogue hair that's just like in my face. Okay, so where the hell was I? Okay, hold on. Okay. Despite times with a broken arm. Got it. I got that hair. Bye, hair. Bye. Okay. I didn't read that right at all.